In pandemic time, Americans have a duty to each other to abide by certain restrictions, even if they're prescribed by government.
But the government prescription is not the cause of those responsibilities.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Welcome to the American Religious Town Hall. I'm James Weingartner here for Pastor Lutz, who is in the pandemic quarantine. And so we're trying to be pandemic appropriate. And here we have limited the number of panelists so that we have few and far between folk here in this studio. So we welcome you, and we're looking forward to discussing this important topic. And we'll begin by introducing our panelists. Bishop Olson?
My name is Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Roman Catholic Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, and I'm canonically resident of the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the guy that had the mask on a minute ago. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. We're part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
A movement growing in the United States expresses the concern that the restrictions placed by government in an effort to stem the transmission of the COVID-19 pandemic, including forced business closings and the wearing of masks, is a violation of the freedom of the people. The movement seems largely based on the premise that the precautions are an overreaction to the risks and that they are being politically manipulated to usher in larger government control of the populace. Protests have increased. Individuals have engaged in civil disobedience, including business operation in defiance of the restrictions and the refusal to wear masks as required by law. We are asking our panelists to respond to the following questions. 1, do Americans have a right to go into public without a mask in the middle of a pandemic? 2, are the restrictions a precursor to more government control? And 3, what is the religious or moral aspect to the compliance or refusal of these restrictions? Now we go to our panelists, and we begin with Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. I begin with the mask on because I think it's appropriate to illustrate the necessity for us during pandemic time to take precautions. And I do not think that precautions are, even if they're required or prescribed or mentioned or in any way supported by government, necessarily means that we are headed down the road to ruin or government control. And I know Bishop Olson's not going to take that position, but folks in the movement that Mr. Weingartner, our moderator, mentioned, have taken that position. But to me, that movement lost all credibility when they marched into the Michigan State Legislature carrying long guns. My wife told me about a meme that someone had written on Facebook. And I didn't get, they stated it much better than I'm going to state it, but this is a longer version of what was said. It was a student who wrote it. And the student said, I have to wear a Kevlar backpack to school and have mandatory active shooter drills and endure metal detectors and otherwise have my freedom restricted in my school and all sorts of places because you want everyone armed everywhere and at all times. Yet you view the requirement not to be able to go to your favorite bar for a few weeks in order to keep us both healthy as a terrible infringement on your liberty. Give me a break.
Bishop Olson?
Certainly. I think there's a couple of things. We've learned a lot in the last several months since the start of this. We've learned a lot more about COVID-19. We've learned a lot about the effects on our emotions when we are on quarantine and isolated from each other. We've learned some of the strengths that are involved with things like Zoom and the technology, things that can be done. We've also learned what can't be done by these things. And all of this, I think, is that the approach that one size does not fit all, right? And I think that there's a responsibility on the part of religious bodies and especially religious leadership to bring something to the table and not just simply comply because the government tells us to do something. Because what is essential to our flourishing as human beings is not only business, but it's also our religious life, whatever that is. And my religious life looks differently than the other religious life of the gentleman here on this panel, and there's some ways it looks the same. And so it's up for us who are granted these rights by God, as we profess, to exercise them well and responsibly. I think, though, to have the conversation with government leadership is usually very welcome and usually very important because we both serve society, each in our respective roles. For example, I'm the bishop of the Diocese of Fort Worth, which involves oversight of parishes, 90 parishes in 28 counties in North Texas. So it required of me to reach out, to have conversations along with my priests and lay leadership in each of these parishes with the local county judges. To hear what they were hearing, to hear what would be a responsible way for us to act, in which way we could mitigate the spread of disease and contagion so that we could worship as in the essential way we believe is essential for us to worship. That takes responsibility. It takes cooperation, but we can't abandon our leadership and our responsibility to the government, and we can't abandon our religious liberty for those very reasons, because soon we will lose it. And I think that we should be proud of the fact and grateful for the fact that we have something to offer to society beyond just even the scope of government. So, for example, as well, with regard to masks, masks are recommended to be worn to prevent the spread of contagion. The person who wears the mask is inhibiting their breath and their respiration so as not to pass disease. Well, we have a responsibility to do that. So I, after consultation with my priests and with other experts in health, have mandated that if you're going to come to church, you're not obliged to come, but if you're going to come to church, wear a mask. All right, you won't be seated without a mask with hand sanitizer because we have a responsibility to our neighbor. All right, now we can do that in our religious tradition. All right, the government is less able to do that because of other things, but in our religious tradition, we're able to do it. They don't like it, but welcome to the Catholic Church. You know, I think also with that comes other responsibilities as well. Outreach to the poor, the elderly, especially those who are prone to have it. So we have a mass, usually the first one of the day after a cleanly sanitized church, for the elderly. All right, for those 65 and older, so that they are able to come at a mitigated risk to their health. All of that is something that we're able to do because one size doesn't fit all, and you measure twice and cut once for the sake of worshiping God as safely and securely as possible, caring for our parishioners' soul and body.
Dr. Matthews.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic, and do Americans have the right to go in public and wear masks? Obviously, they have the right to do it. We see it happening all the time right now. Is it responsible? I think that's the question for me. We are in the midst of a pandemic that we've not seen in my lifetime, in our lifetime. And I think that it is a responsible, an act of responsibility for people to protect not only themselves, but others. Now, this is tricky because when you have government involved, and I am one who I am pretty, careful about government intrusion into our religious liberties. But when you have doctors, and I think this task force that we have seen with these scientists and these doctors, I think these people are some pretty smart individuals. And when we see that we are, I think, 110,000 plus deaths and millions of people who have contracted this disease, this is something that's serious. And we should do everything we can to maybe not focus on do I have the right to do it, but is it my responsibility as citizens of humanity? Now, people will say, well, for the first few months, I did this. In my region, in my zone, in my area, in my context, it's not that bad, so I'm not going to wear a mask. That's where we have to start, it's a balancing act right there. And I think the language is important too. Required versus recommended. I've been to a few countries where when I went to get my shots, or when I researched it, they said, hey, these are recommended, but this is something that's required if you're going to go to this country. And I didn't sit back and say, well, I think I'm going to treat that as a recommendation and not do it. So I think we have to kind of use wisdom too. So at times we have to be uncomfortable for the well-being of our brothers and sisters.
Very good. Canon Peterson?
Yes, I'd like to ask Michael a question before we go on. Is the Roman Catholic Church having services now in the Diocese of Fort Worth?
Oh, yes. We've been having Mass, public Mass since May 2nd. Of this year, and with our precautions necessary in line with CDC, social distancing, and all of those mitigating.
Mm-hmm. I know I'm so basically asking follow-up questions, but what has the impact been on that?
In what?
In relationship to the disease?
Well, none of my priests have contracted it. We've had some exposure, required then quarantine. It hasn't been a spread because we've been so rigid about the mitigations and the precautions. I think social distancing has done the trick, and I think the wearing of masks has also done that. To do this, to do it safely, you have to mitigate and you have to take responsible actions like this. But just the situation in Tarrant County was such that after consultation with the leaders in public health as well, and also government, we made the decision to do this. And the people have been very grateful. People are not obliged to come back. We're about 25% of our attendance, as we were. People have been very generous with especially our social outreach. They've been creative about reaching out, especially to shut-ins. I think in some ways, I said the pandemic hasn't changed human physiology, and it also hasn't changed the fact that we've had shut-ins and people fall through. It's drawn our attention to it. And I mean, we've always had that responsibility to reach out and also to care about how we, cover your mouth when you cough, don't go to school if you're sick. We've always had those responsibilities. It's just this time of pandemic has prompted us to do that.
Well, I have to confess I did not know that, and certainly the Roman Catholic churches in our area are all closed. And,
Each bishop has their responsibility. Well, look, one size doesn't fit all, you know,
Yeah.
and that's it. I mean, some of it is population density as well.
I thank you for that. I think that we have a long history here, actually, in relationship to this subject. And this is not something that's come up in 2020 for the first time. And for that matter, in reading, I found out that the first time in which there was a quarantine was actually in 1701, when members of the Massachusetts Bay Colony fought for a year-long political battle to enact the First Nations quarantine laws against the opponents who said the laws were going to be too strict and severe. And of course, then again in 1918, with the terrible flu pandemic, I find it very interesting that the mayor of Pittsburgh actually brought a ban of public gatherings to a swift and premature conclusion because he had concerns about the upcoming election. In 2020, of course, we are faced with some of the very same dilemmas and dealing with the issues and serious issues in relationship. Are these types of regulations actually violating the Constitution of the United States? And whether or not masks, for example, violate the Constitution. I suspect that one way that one can say that is that, 77% of the people say that it's not violating the Constitution of the United States, and that one reason why that is the case is because the masks are so important, because there's simply not enough testing at this time. And therefore, people would prefer to be safe than sorry in relationship to until the testing comes out. As I said, 77% of one poll, at least, supported religious services and gatherings by suspending them, by suspending religious services, thereby restricting religious freedom. And that, of course, is something that is a concern to all of us. And what is very interesting as well, in that same survey of 77%, Republicans and Democrats were in equal agreement. It was not that the Democrats were taking one side and the Republicans were taking another side, but they were, both Republicans and Democrats were willing to sacrifice civil liberties as a way to fight the virus. And so I think that this is a very important understanding that we have, that the community is so important here, and that we have to act in relationship to what is for the very best of the community. And when the community, it means violating constitutional rights, people are willing to do that if it means public safety and people are going to have proper health.
Dr. Matthews, you had another comment.
Yeah, real quickly, I think a problem that we're seeing is that in some states, businesses, from what I understand, some businesses have been allowed to open at 25% capacity, but then churches are being told that they can only have 10 or so. Right. And I think that's a fear and a major concern that people have. And also, I have a question for Bishop Osa. You guys, our church is not back yet, but now with the speaking and the singing, how does that work with the mask? I know.
Well, like I said, when I'm, like, for example, when I celebrate the Mass, when I'm speaking, I don't have a mask, all right? We only have communion in the hand. We don't share the cup. When we're seated, family units are seated together, or individuals, with 9 square feet of social distancing, which have been mapped out, taped out in the pews. People are seated at the beginning by ushers wearing a mask. They're seated, and then they're escorted out on the way out, like you would at an airplane. So those are those precautions. Music has been somewhat at a detriment. I mean, there's been not a lot of it, obviously, but the importance is that the people have an opportunity for Mass if they want it, and they can do it safely.
Right.
And I think that's the important aspect. because it's so essential to the practice of our faith. Reconciliation as sacrament of confession is celebrated in an open air place where the seal of confidentiality can be respected, but safety is done as well.
And maybe for all of us, your observations, from my observation, it seems like the younger generation with the mask, this is something that, it's really hard for the younger generation to wear masks. Our older generation, they don't have a problem, but even in our congregation, I see a few of our folks when we're kind of out and we see them, some of them don't have masks, and then we had some outside gatherings and some of the young people did not want to wear masks. Yes. So I just want to know.
Let's go to a message from our sponsor.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching.
We welcome you to write in and to share these videos with your friend. They're all online for your enjoyment and for your sharing. We continue now, and we'll close up with our summaries from our panelists, and we begin with Bishop Olson.
Oftentimes in our country, we discuss rights first as the only way to articulate our freedom. In other words, the right to do whatever I want to do. And then law is somehow restrictive of that. But as religious people, I think we tend to begin with responsibilities, and I think that's important. And then from responsibilities, we derive our rights as participation and membership of the greater community. I think the government and the church come at this in two different ways to try to get to the same good, which is an exercise of freedom that is responsible in the formation of a good community. For us, it's fidelity and responsibility to God first and God present in my neighbor.
Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. I think it's also important to understand that during this time, all emotions have been exaggerated. We're at a time where we have this twin pandemic. We have this virus. We also have our attention called to the pandemic of racism, which has lasted a lot longer, but which is right in our face. And all of that, not to mention unemployment and the economic issues, all of that together is exaggerating our loneliness, exaggerating our depression, exaggerating our anger, and exaggerating our fear, including the fear that we're going to lose our rights. I think if we take into consideration that these things are exaggerated within us, we have the opportunity to quieten ourselves and approach things in a more responsible manner with less fear and anxiety.
Dr. Matthews.
Yes. When we see government being a little intrusive with houses of worship compared to businesses, I think that's a time to be concerned and speak out. In addition, I think that we can have our rights, but that does not mean we should not have wisdom. I think it's important for us to recognize that the Scripture talks about we have a one another ministry to care for one another, and we have to look out for our fellow humans.
Ken Peterson.
Yes, an absolutely fascinating discussion today. I've learned so much. In a large and self-governing society, civil liberties exist as a part of a delicate balance. And we are dealing certainly with a very delicate balance right now. And that balance is certainly being tested. And there's no good solution that does not infringe on at least some liberties. And the question that we have to determine is how much of those infringements are we able to have to be able to maintain liberty. Yes, Americans are entitled to freedom from government intrusion, full stop. But I also believe that we have an obligation not to unnecessarily expose our fellow citizens to a deadly pandemic, to a deadly virus. Protecting Americans from pandemics while also preserving our economy and our civil liberties is not easy, and it is not getting easier. But it is also absolutely essential.
Thank you so much, Cannon. We're in a pandemic issue, in a pandemic era, and it's very, very interesting that we have responsibilities for compliance with government, but we also have responsibilities to participate in government, to participate in the decision-making process, in the analysis, in knowing the science and understanding these things, and just like your Catholic churches, taking the proper precautions consistent with the environment that you're in. It's a beautiful thing that we live in a free country, that we can discuss these things without animosity, without name-calling, without the challenges that we keep hearing out in the public discourse. But in the United States of America, we have the privilege to discuss these things freely. The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy, and that the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee the American right to all who appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. Now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.